All right. We are back. It's so funny that we're just having a conversation with J3PO, and he was talking about real synths and knobs versus soft synths and software. And I think it was right during that conversation, OBS got offended and decided to do some very, very quirky things. Like reduce the stream rate and not cooperate while it was in studio mode. So for those of you who are watching and, got to see all that, once again, the show is produced by Trial and Error is definitely the one we learn the most from. So we are back. I'm going to disappear and try to fix some of these things. Mr. Fabian Brown, the mic is yours.
For those of you guys who are just tuning in, this is part 2 of the Music and Arts Festival here at Ropeadope, virtually here, of course. And if you didn't catch the first part, definitely do yourself a favor, go back, rewind time, and check out the amazing discussion of JP3O. Julian Pollock with his release today, available on Bandcamp, Apple Music, Spotify, and all the good places that are out there. And just dig in. We had a great conversation about the process of composition, and I'm excited for what's to come this upcoming hour, because we have great musicians like Greg Cordes that's going to bless us with his story, and he has a track that's available out today. We're also going to be visited by some other Ropeadope artists, greats from Tim Motzer. We're going to have Joe Pignato from Bright Dog Red. And we're going to have Deckel Bohr all the way coming in from Germany. So stay tuned for a tremendous amount of talent coming in from the Ropeadope roster here at our Music and Arts Festival. But let's turn our attention over to Mr. Greg Cordes coming in from the UK. Sir, how are you?
Well, thank you, Fabian. Very flattered and honored to be part of it. The names you just rattled off are incredible musicians, so it's very nice to be in amongst it all. I appreciate it.
No, absolutely. I kind of joke with Lewis, often, all the time, like, dude, how do you keep attracting such amazing, first of all, not just amazing artists and amazing musicians, just amazing people, Greg, and I know we're just connecting here, but I know you're torn from the same cloth as many of the other amazing people on the Ropeadope roster. And today's a pretty significant and a pretty big day for you, my friend. We have your single that's just come out. Actually, the album is set for release on June 25th of this year. Today's single Down Cork is available. You can visit Bandcamp, Apple, Spotify, yet again, and an amazing lineup. Can you just share a little bit about what you want people to expect from this single, and then furthermore about the album too?
Well, I mean, this particular tune, I actually revisited it because there's a form of it on the first album, but I came back to it as an up quark. So I've been meaning to write a down quark. So it kind of ping pongs across each other. I actually brought it to the studio because I'd never really met the guys that recorded at least half of them in person, let alone played with them. So as the studio session coming in, I'm like, okay, so we're doing this. So I brought for any musicians out there. You can bring a tune that's an easy blow, if that makes sense. It's fun, it's open, it's the melodies are a little bit tricky. It's quite triple D, not the easiest one to kind of to play off the pad, but essentially it's quite a lesser involved arrangement than some of my other pieces. So I thought, I tell you what, we'll warm up on this. We'll figure each other out, and then that will be my kind of rehearsal. But we'll record it anyway. And I mean, speaks to the quality of the musicians on the album. Those guys, we played the first time, and I'm thinking, holy, this is going on the album. This has to go on the album because it felt great, and it also allayed a lot of my fears that I won't get left behind in a plume of smoke by these guys. These are great people and great musicians. They're not there to burn me or set themselves. They are so good that they listen to what the music is and what the requirements of it and play within that. And they make me sound pretty all right too, which is very nice of them. So it was originally the warm-up tune, but it kind of had a vibe. So I thought, I'm going to put it up front. Plus, it's about 4 minutes long as opposed to some of the longer ones I've got.
It's interesting how things just really kind of settle in and come together nicely like that, especially when you surround yourself with, tremendous musicians. On this album, we have playing tenor and soprano saxophones. We have Tony Malabai. On electric guitar, we have Steve Cardenas. On piano and keys, we have John Coward. And obviously on upright bass and electric bass, yours truly, Mr. Greg Cordes. And on drums, we have Kenny. Help me pronounce Kenny's last name. Kenny
Wollison, the great Kenny Wollison, one of my favorite all-time drummers and people.
I love it. And I got some notes here in front of me. Mongolia, the album was an album written in transit and reflects time spent in a gatehouse of the foot of the Brecon Beacons in Wales. I can't wait to hear about that. The inspiration and chaos of Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn, and an extended stay in Iceland. Help me out, the city in Iceland. How do you say it?
Reykjavik.
Oh my. Each place greatly influencing the music and the narratives contained within. So, Greg, help me break this down. That just sounds like an amazing repertoire of influences coming and affecting the compositions. Was there one location other than the other that really inspired, any particular tracks or the overall album?
Before you answer that question, I want to interrupt this program to say that we have some heavy thunderstorms rolling in here. So I will warn you, Fabian, you are the host. I guess make me co-host just in case one of us loses power. But hopefully that didn't derail you too much, Greg. But such is television.
I don't know, to get your question, Fabian, I don't know, like it's so many times you look back on something and you go, no, I really didn't have a clue what I was doing. The path wasn't A to B. The path was materializing one step at a time. And the reality of it was I'd kind of disentangled from a really long relationship with somebody who remains my best friend, but kind of having to sort of transition from one stage of a relationship into another stage, you know, and so I guess a lot of the time I was spent was away from it to kind of like distance myself and figure that out. But also with that was the kind of urge to write whilst I was there. And then being sat at the foothills of a beautiful mountain, but also being freezing cold in a place that only had 1 hour of daylight per day. And then also being in Bed-Stuy, there's the sound and motion and things to distract or inspire that are all a bit different. So some of the more slower, plaintive things will definitely be Wales. The tune Emily on the album was written exclusively in Reykjavik. I was staring out the window. Reykjavik's beautiful. So I was all on the water and there's mountains. I was just staring out. And I kind of wrote this tune almost academically. I didn't have an instrument, so I wrote it straight into Sibelius. Kind of like so some. It's not so much the places, but some of the limitations were really important too.
That's phenomenal. You paint a really vivid picture in my mind. Is just getting that inspiration and really drawing from the location and the environment, and and even pulling from the heartstring. Going through the ups and downs of what relationships have and what they don't have, and I can absolutely relate, and I know a lot of people can relate with that too. And maybe before we jump back to Lewis and we listen to a track or two, I know this is your junior album. This is the third album coming from you, but there's a connection and there's a lineage from album 1 to album 3. Can you talk about how everything is connected?
Yeah, I mean the first album it's not the first album, it was an accident, but I was studying doing a postgrad, and part of the requirement of the course was to submit a reharmonization and an arrangement and 2 original compositions. And I was freaking out because I was trying to write, I was trying to squeeze the square peg into the round hole, or trying to write bebop tunes or whatever I thought, but it was also at the same time that I was listening and continued to do so, but listening to a lot to like the Bad Plus and Todd Sickafoose and Chris Lightcap and all these wonderful kind of like music, contemporary jazz music, and Craig Table and these people. I'm like, oh well, they doing something different. Well, and I was convinced I was going to fail my module, but being quite obstinate, it's like, well, I'm going to fail with a submission. I'm not going to fail by not submitting. I'm going to give something, and you're going to fail it. But I gave something, and I was really surprised at how well it was received, actually. So those 2 tunes became the first 2 tunes for the first album. I just kept going. And then the band I had in Bristol sort of said, it's time to record an album. You've got like nine tunes. I'm like, okay. So I recorded the first album. And at that point, I don't know other people are, but I certainly wasn't writing with a body of work in mind. I was literally writing one tune by one tune. It's almost like you're counting out your brown M&Ms, and then you realize all you've done is made a pile of brown M&Ms. You need to start thinking about, differences. So the second album, I learned from the experience of kind of like writing on a tune by tune basis, but thinking, right, I'm writing an album, therefore there needs to be some differences. And then on the third album, there's a through line for a couple of album titles. The first 2 have sort of self-referencing titles because I like literature. I like the idea of, like, if you write several books, you can go between places. Why does everything have to be a cut and paste sort of thing? So I just thought I'd be a bit self-referential, and I thought, well, like, and also I wrote a tune on the second album called All That Is. And then on the closure of this album, I wrote All That Is Part 2, which is kind of funny to me because just when you think you figured it out, no, you need another year or 2, and there's some other stuff. So the kind of cycle was almost the accident of the first album, the standing back of learning from what happened to the second album, and then the kind of sort of almost like this, like the mining of resources from not only the experience, but like themes that can be related to, and also kind of almost bring me to a full circle where I didn't think I was going to do a 3-album cycle. I never thought I'd do 1 album, but I did a 3-album cycle. I'm like, cool, I think I may have drawn the curtain on these themes and this because, you know, and a worldwide pandemic is very convenient for shutting off something for a year and a half and getting me into other interests. So I'm already writing music that is pointing in the direction of some new interest and new. I promise I'm not going to write a lockdown album. I fear the slew of lockdown albums that are going to come out. But the cycle was kind of like, if I want to keep doing this in a way that feels right for me, that feels like a great body of work to kind of go, cool, that's 1 to 3. What's 4 to 5 or whatever, what's the next thing? And it just kind of means that I can walk away from some of the easier established tropes and devices that I've figured out. And I kind of almost need to break away from them to find what the next thing is. Otherwise I might be struggling a bit more. So the third album is this really beautiful kind of like, it's the well, for me at least, it's kind of more ambitious on the playing side of things. I've always sort of feared those large open improv moments because I'm more of a session musician. I play with pop stars and people, and we learned the thing and we went out and toured and delivered the thing. This album is definitely moments where like I'm sitting hanging in there while these guys are playing, and I've got the lion by the tail, and I'm glad that I did it. No, I'm gonna have to correct a little bit. That would cause some consternation. I'm in the UK. I'm the southwest of UK, just outside Bristol. To Wales. This is like the first couple of minutes of Drift, so it's obviously the more things happen as we go along. But I really liked like when you're writing a piece of music and there's going to be improvisation going on, you kind of got a problem. We got a lot of problems, but like one problem is right. How do I give enough to the musician so I don't just say, "Hey, do something great, do your thing." They need something to kind of like work some parameters or something to work towards. I've definitely been on gigs where people like just do something. I'm like, well, now it's all on me. So you want to write that you give them something that they know what they're working towards, but then you don't constrict them with too many sort of things. So for me, the balance is finding that sweet spot where you kind of find it in the middle where they know what they're working towards. A lot of my tunes have fragments of melodies happening all the way through, not just returning to sort of a verse or a chorus. They have new themes because for me that helps keep the momentum. So the solo isn't just as abstract from the piece of music. There is a kind of, it's the part B to where C is going to be. So this was the introduction, which I thought Steve Cardenas and John Coward, so the guitar and piano, played so beautifully together, so that I go, right, I know what you two can do together. I've heard it. The reason why I booked them because I know individually, but collectively what they can do. But I also wanted to write a guitar theme that would come in and creep in and then into the tune. So it's almost like there's a improv, but underneath it there's this very slow moving through line that kind of comes through, and then we move into the tune. So it's about 2 or 3 minutes of the kind of the first stage of that.
All right, let's take a look.
Oh things done. Then we'll see our hearts inside, only when our worlds collide. Many ways around the sun, many ways to get things done. Many ways around the sun, many ways to get things done.
And we are back. And the power is still on. We are still broadcasting from the shack just outside the great city of Philadelphia. We had a great conversation about that, and we're going to continue that, I hope. We're here with Greg Cordes in the United Kingdom, and we saw his video from his upcoming album, Magnolia. And I urge people to go to gregcordes.bandcamp.com and check that out. It's in pre-order. We do pay attention to who's first, and we do offer perks from time to time for those that are early adopters, so please jump in there. I want to say Greg's previous record was met with incredible critical acclaim, and we expect the same for this. Greg, is there anything that you'd like to say in closing about the record?
It's nice that, like, we did it last year. I don't know how Tim feels and other people, but like you kind of spend all this time working towards a thing, then you do it, and then you mix it and you master it, and you're like, whoa, and then and then you're ready to kind of, and then a pandemic happens, and then everything just stops for a year or so. I mean, I did this in February last year, and it's so nice to come back to it. Like it's been, especially with everything that's kind of gone on. So thank you so much for like helping me out and mentioning it and pushing out, because it's bringing me back to the world and it's nice to have my own music actually pull me back in. And you know, I was at first I was apprehensive about, am I going to be able to talk about this? So, am I going to be able to relate to something? But I listened to it yesterday just to kind of go, okay. And I'm happy.
You're okay.
I mean, it's
good.
It's nice. It's like, thanks. It's great. It's great to have a thing.
It's a good sign. We're also joined here by the great Tim Motzer from Philadelphia. Tim, how are you?
I'm good. How are you guys?
We are good. We've been through the ups and downs today, and like I said, the power's still on, so we are happy. Another wonderful Friday. We are truly blessed. I'm not really sure how it happens. In the middle of 2020, we made a decision to slow down our release schedule to a trickle, and as we look at the many less than 75 records that we are releasing in 2021, I'm finding gems every one, and your album, Tim, is certainly one of them. I put up a favorite track of mine from Adrian Harpelman, Light Blue Movers, prior to playing the title track from your album, Many Ways Around the Sun. I found some really interesting parallels to the kinds of sounds that you like to tinker with and build. And it's funny because we started this out with a very progressive, younger, no disrespect, younger than me, musician, J3PO, Julian Pollock, who did an entire breakdown of creating. He did his entire album himself at his home, as you did, Tim, and is a master at capturing sound in samples and then reassembling almost as if he's conducting an orchestra. And this is just it feels to me like the maturity of electronics as an instrument. And as part of, and so the future's got to be so exciting. Can you speak a little bit about how you created your album?
Well, each track was kind of a different experience in a way. Talking about Many Ways Around the Sun, the single that you just played, that track happened in the studio. I was just down here one Saturday and was totally in the vibe of going to definitely record something today. It was really coming. It was coming on, basically. And I just remember looking around the studio and seeing this reed organ that was collecting dust on the other side. And I was like, let me pull that over here. So I drug it across the studio and plugged it in, and it actually came on and worked. And
good.
I bought it like 10 years ago and never used it ever. And so I was playing it just at that moment and played like a chord, and then I played another chord, and all of a sudden the sound of that reed organ and those chords, the song was coming through just like that. It was amazing. And I really couldn't move fast enough to grab microphones and plug things in. I wasn't ready, I wasn't ready to record, but the song was coming through, and I felt the spontaneity of that idea or that thing that was coming through. I had to capture it right then. So I got mics on that thing, and I started tracking that organ, and the whole song laid out pretty much. And when you're tracking like that by yourself, it's just, for me, it's chaos, and I'm just grabbing microphones and setting up other tracks and stuff like that. And I put a guide vocal on, and lyrics were coming through. Everything was just coming through at that moment in time, and I found that really, really special. So the whole track was kind of an improvisation or an instant composition that happened. And then I layered a bunch of, I just kept going and layering aspects, laying in bass, laying in snare drums. I have this big leady kick drum that I put in, so it's all played in stuff. I played all the instruments, guitars, and sang all the vocals and played cymbals. And
So
that
let me ask, when you say it came to you so quickly, which is fascinating to me, when you're layering in the other pieces, like how has the structure already, is the structure already, like evident to you, and you think it needs finishing touches, or is it closer to the original vision in your mind? You were like, well, this isn't really finished. I need to add more.
Well, I think in the case of this song, the chord progression, because the thing about my history in music is I'm an improviser, and that's what I do all the time. And all my bands are that way. And when I work with dancers, I'm improvising live scores and stuff like that. So there's an aspect of like when I'm on, or when I'm really on in the zone, that what's happening, what you're printing is it. It's not going to be chopped up necessarily. But I wasn't really thinking like that. I was just capturing this thing that felt so complete. So that entire organ bit became the template for the whole track. And so then when I continued, I was just adding the other instruments that I was hearing, first the voice, and then I think I put bass in there and started putting percussion in there, and, just kind of going. And as I was hearing this, I was hearing the track developing and where it should go, So something like that.
I'm going to jump in real quick, Tim, because I'm listening to you talk, and I just can't help to think. So you have this background, this improvisatic background, right? And when I'm listening to the album, when I'm listening to the record, it's you're pouring your heart and soul. It's the lyrics, it's songs. You've created songs, right?
Yeah.
But then I'm thinking about the instrumentation, and I'm thinking about the production, the thought that goes behind the production.
Yeah.
I guess my question is, how do you identify? Are you a guitarist? Are you a songwriter? Are you a producer? Like, how do you identify? What are you bringing to this world? I'm just curious, because when I get a talented musician like yourself on a call like this, I kind of have to poke and prod a little bit. What comes to you naturally?
Yeah, well, I've always been a producer, and I've had my label 1K Recording, so I've been producing records for that label for 20 years. So I've always had a studio. I've always been a producer, but then also as a guitar player, like kind of, an eccentric, eclectic guitarist. I mean, I've really gotten into sound worlds for a long time, but especially in the last 10 years with the technology that's available in foot pedals. It's insane, and so I have to my right here, which you can't see, a pedal board that really is almost like a modular synthesizer in a way. And I plug my acoustic guitar or whatever through it, and I have all these sounds. So, I think I ended up becoming a guitarist / producer in a way too, because when I play live solo, I'm like producing everything live, including bass lines and drums and guitars and all that. So that's how I play if I do my solo soundscaping improv thing. But I think it's really gotten to the point where that kind of approach is just in my head, because I'm always working that way and doing everything really quickly. And when I'm tracking, I think I take on that same idea. Like, I can't get to the next track fast enough, because I hear the idea and I want to get it down right then. And so it was like really a quick thing. And then when I get all the parts in there, then I can actually sit back and say, okay, what's this sound like? And that might be when the editing happens. Like, okay, I can take this part out, and this bridge is a thing, and I need to put a snare drum in there, or I need to put hi-hats here. Then I might start like, do some gardening, with it, and dig out all the weeds, and like, this is starting to happen. And I think another thing that I did on this track was I put in a lot of experimental vocals, a lot of looped vocals that were going through a variety of looping pedals that could just give me like, I don't know, like a half a note or a few notes, and they would kind of spit and sputter, and some would be long notes, but there would be a lot of this kind of stuff going on. So that's also part of the bed of that song, and it just created this really ethereal kind of landscape that I'm into, that kind of stuff.
No, I can really appreciate that. And for those guys who are just joining us here, we're hanging out with the best of the best here at Ropeadope. So Tim Motzer, his track, the title track, "Many Ways Around the Sun," came out last week. It was, and the album is set for release on July 30th of this year. So I'm really excited to what's coming. There's a nice little banter back and forth with one of our mutual friends in an email communication about this track. So we'll have to have a good laugh about that offline. It was really funny to catch that email, Tim. Really funny to catch that email.
I want to say that Tim's album is the kind of album that will evoke a mood for you anytime you put it on. So when you have that moment and you want to go within and you want to just kind of recalibrate, if you will, with all the chaos in the world. I know that in 5 years and 10 years, it's kind of, referencing back, I always have to mention this, King Britt presents Sister Gertrude Morgan, that same Tim Motzer vibe is there. And I didn't know it. It's King Britt presents, and Tim's credited on the album, but it always sets a tone, a mood that is soothing and explorative for me when I put it on. It's not a casual listening process, although I think with these songs that you can also listen to it casually. But I will say, I think it's always gonna be that for so many people. When you talk about it, Tim, I think about surfing. When you first look at surf,
that's awesome.
When you
that's kind of like what it is, really.
There you go. When you first look at surfing, you're like, oh, it's about standing up on the board. And then you paddle into the water and you realize, no, it's about, first of all, surviving in a substrate that you can't survive in if you're not careful, right? Then it's about paddling and upper body strength. Then it's about this. And there's all these parts to it. Then it's about mental, knowing when the wave's coming and when to turn around and when to paddle and when to be up. And when you're thinking about all those individual parts, you have to think about them. But when you are, you just aren't there yet.
Yeah.
When you've done it enough times and your body knows when to stand up and your mind knows when to paddle, you can just do it intuitively, then up you go, and it's exhilarating, and that's what this reminds me of.
I was listening to a Jim Jarmusch interview yesterday, which was great, and I forget what magazine it was in. Oh, Aquarium Drunkard, and it's great if you get a chance to listen or read it. And everybody's talking about the same stuff right now, like coming out of this and what have you been doing and all that stuff. But we got into process, and he had been to Neil Young's ranch doing a film score with Neil Young, and Neil looked at him at one point and said, you don't want to know what you're doing, really. It'll just ruin it. And I really think that that's a really accurate thing. Like this record for me, and also everything that I kind of do, I really never know what I'm doing. I just dive off the cliff because you can't get hurt in music. So you just go there. And usually the accidents are the best part. It's like the places that you end up falling into that you wouldn't have done if you were trying to, where do I go after this D chord? You just really have to follow your intuition and your heart. And I think when you get to that space, just amazing things happen.
And I'll take that back to Greg's record. I also want to welcome our additional guest on the sofa behind Greg. Oh no, gone now. Sorry. For a moment there, we had an added guest in the room.
Still there. She's thin enough to camouflage.
Is she there? Yeah, she's got just enough glow for us to not tell. The camouflage is working well.
Chilling.
Greg spoke about putting yourself into an uncomfortable situation. I'm paraphrasing here, but to determine where you're headed next. And I'll take it back to surfing. It's like you have to look where you're going, not where you are. But Greg has a technique of putting himself into different situations, and Fabian referenced that in his bio and story about his album earlier, putting yourself in uncomfortable places, new places, in order to bring yourself to a higher level. Greg, do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, I mean, it was really nice to talk about it out loud because some things you're not conscious say I'm going to do this in order to achieve this, but when you stand back and go, how did I get here? Oh, I think it was this process. And something that Tim, which I've been loving hearing you speak, Tim. It's been really interesting to me. But also, I kind of wonder that it's that whole kind of thing when I'm writing stuff. It's almost like, let's say in physics, like the act of observation changes it. So does the act of the composer, like if I really will it to something, does that change and shape it to something that it maybe doesn't have to be, all that sort of stuff? So I kind of feel more like, personally, when I'm writing, I'm trying to get out of the way of whatever this is. So like, and when you're doing some weeding and doing the garden, I love that because it's like I'm just trying to like get me out of the equation, because me wants to be liked, me wants to be successful, me wants all those things, me wants these things, and I'm gonna try and put that into music. So I need to keep me out of it, and whatever that means. And I surf as well, so everything you talk about surfing is like, it's a beautiful kind of way of linking up. And I think like the me as a surfer, you've got to get me out of surfing, because you're going to get hit real hard, and you got to realize that the ocean doesn't care about a me.
It does not care.
There is no me.
It is the perfect example of no discretion. I mean, it has right, absolutely no care.
But you succumb. So when you're surfing, you succumb to the ocean and those things. But when you compose, I don't know what it is I'm succumbing to, but I try to keep that same approach to that. I succumb to something rather than I birth and create something. I just get out of the way and hopefully put a few things together.
Part of your travels were surfing in the Hebrides, I think you mentioned?
Oh man, I'd heard rumors about Scottish surfing for years, and so I grew up in New Zealand, so I benefit from great surfing, and like it's funny, like, because over here in the UK it's quite expensive to surf, because you got to go somewhere and park, and there's a whole economy built around that.
Yeah.
But in New Zealand, like, it's like the poor kids. We were the poor kids. We lived by the ocean, so we didn't have VCRs and all these things. So we just surf because what else we got to do? But I think. Oh,
I feel so sorry for you.
I know, it was great. It's like, how did they get that so wrong? All the rich people, all the bourgeois lived in town in these high rises, and we got to surf, and we got to feel the kind of, like, from a young age, the acquiescence towards things that are greater than you, and to be cool with that, and actually kind of go, oh no, if I stop resisting this thing and try to acquiesce, but it's not a giving up, it's a kind of an agreement. And that's kind of how I feel about playing the bass as well. It's like the double bass is hard, man. If I try to punch a hole in it, try to impose myself on it, I'm gonna get tired. But if I acquiesce to it, then I get a better sound. I can play longer. And I think surfing, and more recently I've started doing jiu-jitsu. It's the same thing. If you try to stop something, you're missing out on so much stuff. And I think music, Tim and everybody here, is like, I think composition is like, it's you're getting out of the way of something, but I just don't know what that thing is. But that's not for me to understand.
We are in the high country, gentlemen. We are in the high country. That was so brilliantly put. You've defined my life as well, trying to get out of my way. I'll let you know if I'm successful. Yeah, go on. I'd like to just queue up another video while we're here. Take a little break and let people see. Speaking of somebody who's searching and seeking, Mr. Dekel Boer, who I was hoping would join us, but it's probably late and rainier in Berlin. So
they're an hour on top of me. So if I'm at 10 o'clock, he's 11 p.m. for him. So
it's not unusual, but let's play the video and then we'll come back and chat. All right, we are back. The Ropeadope Music and Arts Festival, which has become a very esoteric, wonderful, philosophical hang as the storms rolled through East Philadelphia and did not destroy us this time. We are still able to broadcast. I want to say thank you to everybody who's watching and listening. And go to downloads.ropeadope.com and check out all the wonderful music. One thing we did not mention, as Tim Motzer was in the room and we played his title track from his upcoming album, 1K Recordings. Number 1K Recordings at bandcamp.com is the place to go. And first thing you should do is pre-order the album. Then dig into the dozens and dozens of Tim Motzer recordings. But it's a candy shop, folks. You will not be disappointed. I'd like to shout out Mr. Fabian Brown for holding it down. Thank you for being here. It's always a pleasure. We are having some fun, bro. We are having some fun.
It's a great time, Lewis. You know I joke about it and say it often, but you know the cast of amazingness that you are able to assemble at any given moment on programs like this and just on the roster, it's absolutely phenomenal. And I enjoy the on-air banter as much as I enjoy the behind-the-scenes banter too. So it's a lot of fun.
One day we'll just have to put up that big ticket, the price to come and hang with these cats. we are blessed. Wonderful things happen backstage, but also online, and we are trying to bridge that gap to try to bring it. Just be a portal to this world. Because what we found is, I mean, what did we learn in the last year? There are some people with no vision who are taking us nowhere, and there are some people with all the vision who are taking us forward, and that's what we are so fortunate, the people that we are so fortunate to hang out with. As I said, the storm has passed. Another round of rain comes into the roof here at Ropeadope. I don't know if you can hear it, but we're definitely dealing with it. Want to welcome to the room Mr. Joe Pinato from Bright Dog Red. Joe, how are you?
I'm well, Lewis. Good to see you. Good to see Fabian, and great to be here with Tim. So excited to see Tim working with Ropeadope, and very, very excited about pre-ordering that album.
It's beautiful. It's beautiful. I think we want to play a clip, or Fabian, do you have some questions queued up before we jump into this?
Let's play a clip. I mean, I have loads of questions. I know me and Joe can kind of chat about for a little bit. I think we've done a good fair of chatting. Let's give the good people out there in virtual world some tunes, and we'll come back into some more conversation.
Let's pre-pave it a little bit, and I hope that you two guys will hang out, because at the end of this program, I have 3 pieces of music that come from Galicia that are just mind-blowing. So I hope you guys will hang out and at least watch that. But let's pre-pave this a little bit. Joe, can you tell the story of how In Vivo came about before we watch the video?
Sure.
So people know what they're watching.
A track called Under the Porch, which is an excerpt from a live album. Bright Dog Red records live in studio for all of our albums. And that process has gotten people, fans, critics asking, well, how does what you do in the studio differ from what you do in a set? Our sets, like our recording sessions, are just, we say play, and we play until we're done. And so oftentimes it's an hour and 20 minutes straight, and then at the end of the night we see what we have, and we try to capture all of the moments, those moments, the ones that you really strive for, but also the awkward stuff, the searching, the transitions. So we're very much about trying to document the process. And then after we do that, we usually, on our studio albums, we then make something from it. We do some editing, we do some mixing, some studio craft to create tracks and create maybe a cohesive, almost like a musical narrative. Themes come up, the conversations we're having start to inform the titles of the tracks and things like that. But for this album, it's one set done at Shapeshifter Lab in Brooklyn, a venue that's been really good to us. It's an hour-long set, and it's just the set. And the track is the set was edited to create tracks, but the editing is minimal. It's set up so when you hit play, the beginning of track 1 is the beginning of the set, and the end of the final track is the end of the set, and it's all in sequence, and it unfolds as it did for us, with a few breaks, just so that you can listen to shorter sections if you like. So that's what In Vivo is all about.
Beautiful. Let's take a look.
He's somewhere in the dirt. He's somewhere under the porch, sticking his fingers through the lattice. He is a vine wrapping himself around the tree. And he is the branch wrapping himself around the sky. Somewhere under the porch, I buried it. Was it yesterday or tomorrow? I can't remember anymore. Somewhere under the porch is where all my dreams have come true and then let go of themselves. Somewhere under that porch, I could feel the dirt still on my fingernails. I could see the red and blue lights as they flash and go crisp in my head. And somewhere under the porch, there's a heart still beating and thumping, and that is what the ground does, you know? That is what the dirt likes to bring us in the morning when we haven't even had our cup of coffee yet. This is my childhood. These are the holes in the lattice that I speak through and I look through, and this is where I want to go tomorrow. Somewhere between the crackle of leaves and the grass growing up to my fingernails, that's where I want to live. And before I forget my mother's whistle or fuse it with the birds chirping, I think back to all the earthworms grinding themselves to dust and the rain that follows them. What do you know? What do you know about the dark spaces that I can't even think a light could shine through? What do you know about that? My dad prayed for me 3 times, and all I have to show for it is the green that runs out of my hips and digs itself into the dirt with its roots. What do you know about that?
We are back. We are back. The Ropeadope Music and Arts Festival. We just heard from Bright Dog Red, Under the Porch. I'm curious as to the title. Joe Pinata.
Yeah, so a lot of our work, we use the phrase ruminate on different ideas. So the theme that we started to think about for an album that's yet to be released is that kind of place that the vulnerable seek out and define among themselves, that is somehow other from the things that make them feel vulnerable. And so the notion of like Under the Porch was like a place where someone might go and hide, but also they're not hiding as much as they're building their own space. So we were thinking about that on very broad terms, personal, and also just thinking about the state of the world and how important those spaces are. So on this, within this set, our MC Matt Coonan was kind of ruminating on those ideas, and so his freestyles were all dealing with that. And Under the Porch is both the title of this track and will be the title of a future album. So we'll explore that theme more in some of our work going forward.
What color will it be?
Yeah, that you'll have to wait. You'll have to wait. See.
I'm a patient man for this.
We do have a color selected.
Okay.
Oh man, I love the foreshadowing. You know, Joe, you really paint a great picture of what's coming out. Coming out next week and where things are at for Bright Dog Red currently now. But I've had the pleasure of working with you. It's crazy. It has been 4 years. Since 2018, Means to an End, 2019, Housed by You, 2020, something comes along, and then this release in Vivo, and for me, I'm lost for words. I'm not sure if it's the evolution or the journey or the maturity of the band, but every single album, there's something new and fresh and different, but there's something the same, and I really can't put my finger on the pulse with that. I was hoping if you can, talk a little bit, maybe elaborate on the journey and the process, maybe the concept when this band first came out to the scene and the evolution of what it is today.
For sure. First of all, thanks so much for seeing it so clearly. And I'm incredibly impressed at the skill with which you just rattled off all 4 titles. That's impressive. That's difficult to do. So thank you for that. Yeah. So Bright Dog Red is a project that started within my teaching. I'm a professor of music, State University of New York, Oneonta. And I used to have jam sessions with my students, and I modeled those sessions after sessions that I would partake in when I was an undergraduate with one of my teachers and mentors, the great Yusef Lateef. And so when I was a student in those sessions with Yusef Lateef, there was like a kind of uncomfortable relationship to the notion of genre. So there was for Professor Lateef, as I called him, or Dr. Lateef, there was the sense that genre, of course, existed and could be defined, and he understood all that, but he was uncomfortable with using genre as a kind of limiting way. In other words, before you play, if you're thinking too much about genre, your ideas may be limited. And he would really discourage us from thinking about genre. And that was really influential on me. So with my students and in the sessions that we'd have, I wasn't initially thinking that way, but I came to think that way because my students at Oneonta, they represent a lot of different styles. So I'd have these jam sessions and, one student would be a rapper, another student would play tenor saxophone, another student was really into producing beats in Ableton Live, maybe another student played percussion and keyboards, and I'd get them together and they couldn't find that kind of lingua franca. They couldn't, do you know this tune? Have you heard of this art? And so I'd say, well, let's stop talking. Let's just play. And we tried that. And at first they were like really nervous. What does that mean? We're just going to play. And what if it sounds bad kind of reaction? I was like, well, don't worry. This is just for fun. And something would happen that was kind of magical and new, but also even as the members changed, there was something consistent to it. So that's interesting to hear you, Fabian, say that about our albums, because that's what got me thinking that maybe if there was a thread that I could develop over time. And so I thought about that, but I never did anything with it. I had recordings of it, and then about 2014, 15, talking to one of the alumni of those sessions. And we started calling them the Bright Dog Red sessions. I'll explain that in a moment. But he's like, do you ever think of doing that, like you talked about, like taking it out as a band? So I was like, yeah, I should probably do that. So I put together some students and recent alumni and not so recent alumni, and we started having sessions, recorded it, played it for some folks. They encouraged us to start to play out. And very shortly, through some of my music industry connections, through the support of some folks who heard it, we connected with Matt Garrison at Shapeshifter. We were playing Shapeshifter early on. They gave us a real sort of home to do what we do. But then that led to a bunch of different opportunities, like opening for George Clinton and Parliament Funkadelic, which was our third gig, and put a lot of pressure on all of us to say, well, how do you do this for an audience that's expecting to hear George Clinton and Parliament Funkadelic? They're coming to dance and have that kind of experience, to have that intense experience. If you've ever seen one of those shows, they're really amazing. But if they're going in with that expectation, how do we do what we do in that context, which was actually a really good challenge for the band early on. And that's kind of how we've evolved to wherever we're playing, we think, well, how can we do a free, kind of almost like free jazz jam band hybrid set, but make sure that it's right for the audience, that we're interacting with the particular audience that's there, that we're not forcing something on them, but we're also not pandering to them. And so the band's been really, it's been exciting to see that. And so our first album represents some of those early sessions where we were starting to gig. Those gigs that I mentioned came together. And I was recording all of our basically rehearsals where we'd have jam sessions in my home studio. And from that, we edited all the tracks and created means to the ends. After that album came out, one of the things about the album that I both loved, but also wanted to not move away from, because we still do it quite a bit, but that album it's kind of scattered. There's a lot of different styles, a lot of different time feels. And so we thought, well, what if we pared the group down from the 11 or 12 musicians that are on Means to the End to a small group? We formed a quintet. That group did like 50 gigs in a year. And so Housed by You represents now another incarnation of, well, what if you did this with the same musicians for a long time, a lot of gigs? And that really was very exciting. And it led us to, between the relationship with Ropeadope and that album and all the gigs we were doing, to build additional connections. And so the band started to be not just former students of mine, but friends of mine or contacts. One old friend from when I worked for ECM Records was Eric Person, soprano and alto sax. And so he joined the band to basically fill in when Mike LeBombard, our tenor saxophone, was away on a tour. And Eric really liked it. He's like, well, anytime you'll have me. And I'm like, we'll have you anytime. So now we had the addition of Eric, and we started having a lot of sessions. And that led to Something Comes Along. And there was so much stuff there, and it all made sense, and it was cohesive. Even though they were from 3 separate sessions, we decided to do it as a double album, and we had the support of you guys, which was fantastic. So shout outs to Lewis and Fabian for supporting us in that effort. And we released Something Comes Along, and things were really happening for the band. There was a lot of attention. So that maturity you're talking about was like, it was paying dividends. And maybe the most obvious thing was some recognition. Winter Jazz Fest in early 2020. There was a West Coast tour brewing, possibility of some things in England. And then, of course, COVID hit. And during COVID, everything shut down for everybody. We were able to do one live performance in November of 2020. And that's what's on In Vivo, the album that you just played the video from. And one little trivia thing about In Vivo is we had the session at Shapeshifter for that album on the date that the US presidential election was called. And it was, weird because on the way to the venue, a number of the musicians in the group, myself included, got stuck because there were spontaneous celebrations in the streets. So like streets were closing down and people were celebrating and honking horns. And our MC Matt actually came 20 minutes into the set because he hit such terrible traffic. And he's texting me and I'm playing, looking at my phone, seeing texts are coming in from Matt Kuhn. And I'm like, well, he'll get here when he gets here. But when he entered, his freestyling that night was very much informed by the change in power and the election results. So that's kind of like, in a nutshell, Fabian, that's the story of Bright Dog Red.
I love how the improvisational approach extends to the audience. This is the holy grail of what we're trying to communicate with people, is that music is not created by someone at a distance and broadcast to you. I mean, the entire time that I've been in the business, I've been trying to bring the stage back down to ground level. That's music is an interaction between the players and the listeners, and you embody that so perfectly. You're not sitting saying, well, we're improvising and you're listening. You're saying we're improvising and you are part of this improvisation. And that is so much like life, more than we ever want to admit on a regular basis. That's the beautiful thing to me. And I think that's a healing power.
Right on. I couldn't agree more. And that's why when we find ourselves, one time we found ourselves before a festival audience, and we were the headliners, which we didn't know. And we're at an outdoor festival.
Really?
There's like people holding babies, and there's older people sitting in lounge chairs, and it's a nice sunny day, and we're like, oh, do they know who they booked? Because so we're like, well, how do we play for this audience? And we're like, all right, well, we'll use rhythm as our organizing principle. It'll be a rhythmic set. We'll think about how and where we incorporate dissonance. We won't avoid that. It's part of what we do. I mean, we have Cody Davies doing electronics, comes from a kind of, sample and glitch-based, noise-based background. So like, that's a big part of our sound. And, the people were incredibly responsive, and it actually was one of our best sets where we got tremendous feedback from this crowd. And afterwards, the town people, as we're packing up, everyone was just really great to us, and we were invited back to play the festival, which is always a good sign. So the audience the audience is always the extra players in the group. Absolutely.
There it is. I mean, a great musician, and I can't recall who at this moment, said to me, like, this is about listening.
Yep.
Great music is about listening, and you're actually taking it, or admitting that you're taking it to the next level, which is we are listening to the audience as we are improvising. And I think improvisation allows you to do that. If you've rehearsed your set and you have to present it, and that's what it is, great respect to James Brown, but we are in an era where the connection is more important, and great respect for that.
Yeah, just say briefly, there are also different kinds of musical experiences. So it's like what we do is a particular thing, and there's times where I've gone to highly structured, very ordered pop performances, and I've had a blast. Like it for us, we try to understand, well, what does the audience come out for? Sometimes they're coming out to see us because they know us. Other times they're at a festival and they just know there's going to be live music. Or they're in a club and they know there's going to be jazz, but that means a lot of things to a lot of people, so you don't know what their expectations are. And so we try to get a sense of what they're responding to, and again, you don't want to pander to people because they'll pick up on that, and you also don't want to exclude them or seem like what you're doing is separate from them.
Is separate, right? I mean, I'll take it to a further level, if I may. Folk music. I mean, the primary difference for me between folk music and presented music, if you will, or non-folk music, is the interaction with the audience. I mean, you're making your style of music, your style of expression, a folk music experience. People are interacting with you. I've been to many, many folk festivals, and I've noticed that that's what's different at a folk festival than an arena gig or even a downtown jazz gig, is that separation. Everyone is part of a folk festival or a folk music experience. This is the music of the people, is what you're saying.
I love that analogy. I'm going to steal that. No, I won't steal it. I will credit you. But
I
really
don't.
great to hear,
I don't
for
need
sure.
credit. I don't want credit.
I will say the sage Louis Marks. That is really terrific.
Please don't.
But yeah, I mean, even the title I mentioned earlier that I would explain it just in brief. I was driving with my wife, and we saw a guy in a Clifford the Big Red Dog costume. And I didn't know what Clifford was at the time. I don't have children. It's like my nieces and nephews are too old for Clifford. So I just saw a guy and I said, look at the bright dog red. It was just one of those things where my brain just flipped the syntax. And my wife's like, I think you mean bright red dog. I'm like, yeah, I do, but I like the sound of that. So I use that discussion as kind of an analogy for those jam sessions. And I would explain to the students, like, hey, if something doesn't come out right, don't panic. Like, there's no consequence. If it doesn't come out right, so what? Who says what came out is wrong? Like, just go with it, see where it takes you. And so the syntactically challenged name of the group is somewhat symbolic of kind of the ethos that we're trying to adhere to.
I would call it syntactically transcendent, but
Right.
leave it at that. I want to jump in. I'm just itching to get to some of this music from Galicia,
Can't wait.
and I'm just gonna do the switches here.
Yeah.
Are you good? You're gonna hang for a minute. We'll come back and talk about it.
I'm happy to.
All right,
hang.
let's do it. Got to jump over here.
Dámelo, sax.
disparar. Dicen que ganar es imposible y al final nos van a convencer. Canto, a ver si me levanto, salto, me voy a caminar. Puentes que resuenan con el viento y al vibrar termina por ceder. Canta, a ver si te levantas, salta, vamos a caminar. Dicen que andar hace el camino y puedes ver la senda recorrer. Monstruos que no tienen cabeza y ahora no hay donde disparar. Dicen que andar hace el camino y puedes ver la senda recorrer.
10 seconds.
It was way less than 10 seconds. Fabian Brown, we are wrapping up the June 2021 edition of the Ropeadope Music and Arts Festival. We heard some. I don't even know what to say. We heard some music that requires further listening from Galicia in northern Spain. We're tapped into a community there of people who are making music in earnest, is all I'll say. So stay tuned. Trilitrate, the first band that you heard in that mix, will have an album coming out here at Ropeadope sometime this summer or fall. I'm not sure which, but stay tuned for that. And we are going to travel over there as soon as we possibly can and bring you as much music from there as possible. I want to remind everyone, first of all, I want to say thanks to Joe Pignato and Tim Motzer. Joe, thank you so much.
Thank you, Louis. Thank you, Fabian. And thank you, Tim. Great to spend the afternoon with you folks.
Beautiful. And Tim, thank you as well.
Thank you. It's always great to hang, and I look forward to it always. Yeah, it's been a great day.
So we're going to send people to Bright Dog Red's album In Vivo is available at brightdogred.bandcamp.com. Tim Motzer, we're rolling this out. It's special treats, right? So one single is out, Many Ways Around the Sun, an album of hope, an album of purpose and intent from Tim Motzer, and that's at 1krecordings.bandcamp.com. What am I missing, Mr. Brown?
Well, just a special thanks to earlier J3PO, Julian Pollock, Mr. Greg Cordes for joining us and sharing their time and their talent with their single and then album release. And thanks for all the people out there in virtual world for hanging out with us and being a part of the jam.
We appreciate you. I want to say that we'll be back with a Ropeadope TV episode. Next up is Juneteenth. And we're going to do this the day before on June 18th. We've got a 2.5-hour program scheduled. What we know so far is that we will be doing a segment on the Philadelphia Clef Club, visited by Paul Geis and the artistic director of the Clef Club, as well as V. Shane Frederick, the vocalist on Paul's album. We will also have an appearance from Abiodun Oyewole from The Last Poets, Lisa Marie Simmons from Lake Garda by way of Boulder, Colorado, and Anu Sun from New York City. So we're gonna hang. We're gonna talk about the state of America today, and we're going to talk about healing from a few different angles. Each will be presenting either poetry, music, or a statement, and there will be additional people announced to visit with us. So please join us on June 18th as we celebrate in advance Juneteenth. And I think that wraps it up. Head to downloads.ropeadope.com. Please support independent musicians. As you can see, they are the thought leaders that are taking us forward. So there we go. Mr. Brown, I gotta say thank you. Appreciate you.
Cool hang, Lewis. Thanks so much, guys. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, folks.
Bye, everybody. Have a great weekend. Yeah, have a great weekend.
All right, we're clear.